having our next session of our ongoing series. It is being organized by Jindal Center for Global South, OP Jindal Global University, in collaboration with Jammu and Kashmir Economic Association. Today we are having our guest, Dr. Niharika Singh. She will be sharing her insights about beyond financial inclusion. She will be talking about SHGs as an engine of social and economic empowerment, and she will be discussing about women. So before we will go ahead, I will have some brief introduction about our resource person today. Dr. Niharika is currently working as assistant professor at School of Economics, Symbiosis, Pune. She has been in academia almost 2 decades, and she has done her teaching at several prestigious institutions across India. Her main area of research is labor, gender, and history of economic thought. I would love to, give stage to Dr. Niharika. Please go ahead.
Sure. Thank you so much, Professor Malik. A very good afternoon to everyone. It's a great opportunity for me to share my insights. Thank you for the opportunity. The Center for Global South, OP Jindal University, and Jammu and Kashmir Association, Economic Association. Thank you so much. Here today, I'm here to talk about SHGs as an engine of growth, power, inclusivity, and so on. But all of this has a long history, how it started. Over last more than 3 decades, SHGs started like a small neighborhood collective, and it has grown from small neighborhood collective to become one of the world's largest engine for growth or largest institutional platform rather for women's social and economic empowerment. This began as a very simple idea where women were thought to be brought together for saving together, initiating the concept of saving, lending to each other, supporting one another in one closed community. That has evolved and transformed into a huge life, society changing ideology. It has led to not only financial inclusion, leadership, but a huge tool for women empowerment, changes, and a say, a voice in local governance. Here, it is all the more important for Global South because of the rethinking of development, and we're trying to rethinking development through lived experiences. And this is very important because we're also trying to blend in the indigenous knowledge, community driven model. We're trying to understand how Global South is now emerging as a power, and how there are engines of growth that can be used and replicated elsewhere. I have used data from already publicly available sites of government. I've also used some of the data and experiences and insights from my field experiences. My field experiences involved projects which were funded by NABARD, some ICSSR, Government of Maharashtra, and so on, where I have done field work, sat with members of SHGs in rural areas, remotest of areas across India, like districts in Maharashtra, remotest like Gondia, which is a very remote district, underdeveloped district on the borders of Chhattisgarh, to the remotest villages in Bihar, to Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. So it has been through India, many places, many states and districts. Even within the states, we have covered many districts for these projects. So I will just share my few insights to it. I've prepared a short slide for this. I will just share that so that it's easier for us to look into it. I hope this is visible.
Yes, please go ahead. Make
Yeah,
it full slide and go ahead.
yeah, sure. Yeah. All right. So SHGs, what are SHGs? SHGs started as small voluntary organization, very small associations of 10 to 20. Now, this 10 to 20 number of members is an ideal situation. But in tribal areas, in areas where it's difficult to have higher population from local communities, this number is variable. So we have remotest of tribal areas where the SHGs are formed with smaller groups, even lesser than 10 people in the group. Majorly, they are women led. Approximately 88% of SHGs, self help groups which are in India, are women led, exclusively women. But there are men as well included in the SHGs, but they're comparatively lesser in number. They started with pool savings, small loans within their own group, and to members. They compile, put together their savings, come up with small savings. In fact, if we look into the history of SHGs, the original concept started with the Grameen Bank of Bangladesh by Professor Muhammad Yunus. We all know him. With that concept, it came to India. It was very successfully adopted by Afghanistan and Sri Lanka as well as a huge catalyst. It came to India and was popularized in 1972 approximately by Seva. So in Ahmedabad, in fact, Seva is a huge organization these days. We all know of Seva. When you try to look into small such groups and look into the history of India, you see that very small, at very smaller level, even in South India, there were some groups led by women where they probably started forming groups, small voluntary groups, informal groups, with as small savings act as 25 paise each from each member of the SHG. They could compile together and then formulate a saving that would circulate within that corpora would remain with the SHGs and would be circulated within the members. Whoever needed in times of emergency, that fund could be given from one to the other, and members could borrow from the group. So women felt autonomy in terms of finances, in terms of borrowing. They did not have to get into the formal credit, to the paperwork, and so on. They eventually they built, because they started formulating groups, small groups from similar socioeconomic backgrounds. That led to a lot of mutual trust building. With trust building, the moment you have trust on each other, you also develop collective responsibility. Then you do not keep on changing the responsibility from one to the other. The sense of collective responsibility started. With that, women started becoming more autonomous in terms of finances. Financial independence crept in. They started understanding the importance of money being in their own control. This is the evolution of SHGs. And from an informal group from a typical savings group, it started being formalized more into the system by institutional. It became a major success after NABARD came into the picture. We all know NABARD is the apex bank for agriculture in India. It operates as a huge level. So when it came into the picture, it started with a very informal credit group that NABARD used to fund at various village level and district levels. Eventually, by 1992, they started SHG Bank Linkage Program, BLP, SHG BLP. The moment NABARD started this program because in order to formalize the credit, we needed bank accounts. All the SHGs were supposed to have formal bank accounts, bank account linkage with them, and they would operate through their own banks. So that became a major milestone in the evolution of SHGs in India. Then we started having the expansionary phase in SHGs. We all know about NRLM. The moment we talk of NRLM, we understand that this is for rural livelihood, creation of rural livelihood. Majority of our population still resides in villages. So unless we mobilize the population and the livelihood strategy in villages, we as an economy, we as a country will not be sustainably successful. So thereby, in order to have that, we started to incorporate NRLM into SHGs. We integrated both the concept. In fact, SHGs are the ones that you see if today, in today's context, the members of SHGs are trained in so many things, like social auditors, like for the panchayat didis. We have Pashu Sakhis, we have Bijli Sakhis. We all know about the one that looks after what do we say that we look after all the Asha Didis. We look after all these small sectors, the subdivision of sectors, and then all the SHG members, the head of the SHGs are involved in such. So it is very systematically, one by one, step by step, trying to incorporate formalization of institutions and ideologies into the rural women. Thereby, eventually, when in the last slides that I talk of, the inputs through SHGs have eventually led to a very systematic evolution of empowerment of women, where they have a voice of their own being recognized. We see over 1.2 crore SHGs are active in India today. 88% of them are completely women-led. In fact, if you talk of till 2025, the PIB says that 10.05 crore women households are mobilized. That means they have some say, some involvement in SHGs. SHGs form a very intimate part of rural economy. This is a typical institutional structure of SHG in India. So through the NRLM, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission. So the lowest part is the individual SHG member. Because these members are part of SHG, which in itself is a separate entity. We also have then cluster level federations. They are an aggregate of SHGs. They coordinate training, financial linkages, talk to several other SHGs, try to open their bank accounts, see how many members are there in there. If some members, due to whatever reason, are leaving, how to balance those SHGs. So what happens that if you're a member of an SHG, it is mandatory for you to dedicate some part of your income or some part which is mutually agreed upon by all the members as part of savings to SHG. So you have to submit that amount either every week or every month. So that depends. That's completely the discretion of the SHGs, how they want it to be saved, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly. even for the loan repayment to the banks, it is as per the mutual understanding between the banks and between the SHGs how they want to repay the loan. In fact, you will find that I don't know at our level how would we take it. We all talk of EMIs, right? Monthly installments. What is easier for these SHGs, because they are at a very lower level with very limited amount of not only loan, but very limited amount of income. So for them, many of them, it's much easier to, have those types of EMIs be broken into probably 4 parts. So it's not monthly, it's weekly. So your EMI remains the same for the month, but for the purpose of ease of collection, they divide it into 4 different parts and then they give it to the bank. So the bank official is dedicatedly allocated for SHGs. Say for 1 or 2 particular villages, there would be one bank official or bank representative who would go every week to collect money as part of the EMI from all the SHGs. So it's easier for them also to manage and remember, and the SHG members as well. So that's how it works. Then we have block and district level federations, which actually also help and suggest they advise in governance, planning, and coverage of government schemes, that whatever is the scheme given by the government, that is spread evenly. The trickle-down effect is proper. The trickle-down effect is even in the base effect, in the base. So they are now, what happens, there are different models of SHGs. One of the model of SHG is that all the members would come together and start one livelihood, say a small micro enterprise, which would have one a product that they would manufacture and they would brand it and sell it accordingly. The second model of SHG is such that the members come together as a group, but each member would have their own individual income generation or livelihood generation activity, but they form together as part of the SHG. So that is something which also separates their identity, right? So these two models operate. A lot of here, especially, there would be different supporting institutions. Like there would be NGOs who would be instrumental in coming up with groups of women or mobilizing groups of women with similar socioeconomic background, forming together SHGs and then reporting it to the government that this is, and do all the process of registering the SHG as a formal group, formal SHG group. So that NGOs play a very, very important role even now. State rural livelihood missions are something that is part of the NRLM, and the states are then responsible for their own state at their own level to segregate it and have their own part of the program for SHGs. Say, for example, we have very different structure and very different strategies for SHGs or SHGs in Kerala, which is Kudumbushri, that we know of. The local name of SHGs in Kerala is Kudumbushri, a very highly successful model. Second is SHGs of Bihar, SRLM, again, which are called Jivikas. So these two models are very successful in their own way, but they have different ways of operating. Their structure also somewhat differs. The major structure remains the same, which I have shown, but the intricacies of the structure, the details of the structure can differ state by state. It depends on the state. When we talk of SHG, we think it's easier. We eventually, if you try to look into and read about it, Bihar and Orissa had started with the SHGs at the same level. with similar background, socio-economic background, similar economic uh, base and everything. Even the culture was similar. Today, when we track the history of SHGs and look at the performance of the SHGs in both the states, Odisha lags much behind Bihar in SHG and coverage of SHGs throughout the state. There can be several factors which can restrict or challenge the growth and growth of SHGs throughout. That is also something that we look at, the challenges of SHGs. Now I've tried to create a table which actually sees the distribution of SHGs across the states in India. You see that West Bengal has the highest number of SHGs formed, with Bihar now, Andhra Pradesh, Uttar Pradesh, Maharashtra. But in the next table, I have tried to look at the table from the households mobilized. Despite West Bengal having highest number of SHGs formed, Bihar has the highest number of households mobilized. What does it show? That the coverage of SHGs is much higher in Bihar, because the households are mobilized in more numbers in this state than the one which has highest number of SHGs. So only having the numbers as the parameter will not judge the growth of SHGs accordingly in the state. It is also the number of people involved, the number of household that you are going to affect is something that is going to count the success of SHGs in that state. Uttar Pradesh and Andhra Pradesh are equally very, very high, both in the number of SHGs and in terms of household mobilized. When we come to Maharashtra, we see there's a huge gap. There's a huge gap between the fourth rank, the rank 4 of the SHGs in terms of state, and 5. So 90 lakhs and 65 lakhs. That's the difference. Despite which I will show, there are other tables as well, which shows that Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh have very high entrepreneurial ability through SHGs. So there are different angles to look at the success of SHGs. So here, this is as per the household mobilized and SHG, number of SHGs formed in the states across India. Now, what is the vision and mission? Because all of this is in context of NRLM, National Rural Livelihood Mission, Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana. This is, of course, a Ministry of Rural Development Government of India program. It was started to reduce poverty. In fact, the original mission was to reduce poverty and enhance financial inclusion. It eventually started also to have more and more inputs in terms of self-employment, skilling of women in SHGs. These are the programs that came much, much later on and were introduced even within the SHG framework much later. So to reduce poverty, access gainful self-employment, in fact, if you look at this, you look at the increase in the number of SHGs throughout the years, and you look at the labor force participation, you will have a very interesting relationship between all these variables. We'll go one by one. So the key objectives of this mission was to organize rural poor, especially women, because we are talking of the marginalized sections, into sustainable SHGs. And how can an SHG sustain is also through skilling more and having livelihood generation activities. Promoting financial inclusion and bank linkage, credit access, formalizing credit market, reduction or removal of informal credit market was a very, very important motive of this program. Livelihood diversification and entrepreneurial ability, which was to be developed, is something that this mission tried to mobilize. When we have a lot of financial independence, we also tend to then look at the empowerment and social capital. So all of this has a huge, huge relationship with building of social capital. When you look at the vulnerability index and the vulnerabilities of these SHGs, how they have changed across the years and how they have sustained themselves despite the shocks and the vulnerabilities, is something that makes them more sustainable. So there were programs by government. In fact, there were grants to villages and organization, which was community investment fund given by banks, given by organization states. There was revolving fund. There were eligible SHGs which had been operating for some time. They needed to have some minimum amount of saving operating for more than 3 to 5 years consistently, showing some amount of consistent savings across the years in order to be eligible for receiving revolving fund. So then they would receive revolving fund and they could utilize these funds to generate activities, livelihood generation activities. For health and social needs also, we have vulnerability reduction funds. Say, for example, if we have shocks. In fact, during the COVID times, the government gave these vulnerability reduction fund because many of the women of these SHGs were wives of majorly migrant workers. Migrant workers and workers from the marginal backgrounds at a very lower socioeconomic strata. So during COVID, we all know that many of them lost jobs. So the women were the only source, if they were already engaged in some kind of livelihood generation activities, women were the only source of income, sustainable income during that time period. So in order to sustain their livelihood, they took a lot of loan. So when we conducted this study across the 3 states, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, and Bihar, for NABARD, we found that during COVID times, the loans increased a lot for the SHGs. Now, why did they increase? We looked into it. So when you have loans, we generally try to segregate into investment, consumption, and so on. We found that majority of the loans were taken for consumption purposes during COVID because of loss of livelihoods. So the SHGs, in fact, became one of the important pillars during COVID times for many households for sustaining themselves, because they could easily borrow from funds from the SHGs. So in fact, the banks and states, some of the states also have such provisions of having subvention interest, completely reduced rates of interest, 3 to 4%. If you keep on paying, if some SHGs or members of SHGs continuously keep on paying on time, and there are other categories of savings. So these banks and states have, and also the aspirational districts, mind you, we all know that the aspirational districts also fall in this category. They have the special provision of loan at very reduced rate of interest, which is equal to 3 to 4% for them. So we see that a lot of provision has been made for by the government for these SHGs to sustain across even during vulnerability and shocks. These are over 100 million women are mobilized, more than 100 million women in more than 90 lakh households are mobilized. Now, these are operational in all states and union territories. Of course, the coverage is variable. They're different. The bank linkage program that I was talking about, in fact, that has a huge impact because it has reduced the informal credit market. With reduction in informal credit market, we see that we have a in reduction in informal credit market, we see a lot of reduction in burden of payment for rate of interest, because the informal uh, credit market, we all know how it operates and at what rate of interest it operates. Thereby, the huge gap of rate of interest that is there on repayment, especially between the credit formal and the informal credit market, is something that created a lot of difference in the lives of such women. Uh, when we talk of collateral free lending, this is also in fact we did conduct surveys, primary surveys, and these primary surveys, one of the most important point that came out as the reason to join SHGs by these women was because of the easiness and accessibility to loan. So they could very easily borrow. Whereas when they would go to banks, they would have to do a lot of background check, collaterals, paperwork. Most of these women in rural areas are not that well educated. So it's very difficult for them to do all the paperwork by themselves and get into the loan with the banks. Thereby, the moment they form part of these SHGs, it is very easy for them to access loans. So the accessibility is very, very important for them. This is the process through which the banks, they open their account, they start lending, and so on. We see the growth in this graph shows the growth of SHG bank linkage and women participation across the years, how it has changed. What is the percentage that has changed? With the change in, but a very interesting this thing you will see that with change in number of SHGs linked with bank, the percentage of women SHGs has also increased. It's majorly the women that are taking over most of the loans, even within household. And in fact, you will see why I am talking of women empowerment through SHGs. Through primary field surveys, we found out, and in fact, as per gender economics, this is a very well-written theory, that the moment you educate educate women of the household, women start investing more in the education of the children, right? So that uh, diversification or that change of investment from consumption or from uh, uh, the kind of investments that we're talking of, say, buying of more properties and so on, to education of children is something that is a significant change for a household. Because when we talk of education of children is a very long-term investment, but it also enhances the human capacity building. So human resource creation as an economy is more with more financial autonomy of women. That's what we are working on. And that's a very, very important linkage that we are trying to create over here as economists, as social scientists. So SHGs have, as part of formal banking, they are more than 10.3 million SHGs which have active bank account. So we are not only talking of bank accounts which have been opened once, but they are continuously working and in operation. Under day, this data has been taken under day NRLM by NABARD also, and NABARD 2023. Women's financial ownership, 97% of them are all women led. They have over 100 million rural women now having collective savings, credits, mobilizing of credits, getting into the formal credit market, and so on. Their savings have increased. The average saving that has increased so much. So NABARD actually says when women gain control over savings and credit, they gain control, one, over their future, the second is over the future generations. Here, how SHGs have evolved from savings collectives to livelihood enterprises. Now NABARD came up with these two programs called MEDP and LEDP. So MEDP is Micro Enterprise Development Programs and LEDP is Livelihood Enterprise Development Programs. So these two programs started skilling women. So it's not enough to give money and leave women who have no skill of their own or who do not know how to run an enterprise. So they started training women, and say if they would give some fund in the initial days to women, they would keep on supporting the enterprise for say 3 or 5 years so that they would at least get to a break-even point. And the moment they would attain that, they would leave them to operate on their own. So that would ensure that this model is sustainable even in the long run, not only giving money once, but maintaining that flow and supporting that enterprise for a sustainable period. So in fact, there are programs which continuously identifies SHGs and they keep on skilling them. There are different programs for skilling like tailoring, salon services, pickles. In fact, you would see this creation of a supply chain wherein the SHGs are linked with the markets. These SHGs are also linked with schools, government schools, where the school uniform are made by particular SHGs in supply. This ensures proper involvement and a very robust supply chain management. Because if these SHGs are creating something, producing something, where is the market? Who's going to buy it? So that market absorption is something that also needs to be created simultaneously for them to sustain their livelihood. So there are two ways, two functions and two models that operate even within SHGs, the kind of SHGs. One is savings-oriented models and the other is livelihood-oriented model. We would see with the savings-oriented model, the original primary function is to have more savings of the members, have more internal lending, provide emergency credit and build social capital. In fact, if you look at it very carefully, all the developing states are the ones who are part of these savings-oriented model of SHGs. And when we actually look at other states which are doing pretty well in the number of SHGs or the mobilization of household through SHGs, you would see these livelihood orientation in the states like Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka, Maharashtra. These are economically performing better states than on the left-hand side that we're talking of. So the economically performing lesser economic performing states versus the higher economic performing states. You see the difference in the model of operating of SHGs. I've tried to also look at what are the purposes of these two, LEDP and micro MEDP. So what is the reach? What is the purpose? MEDP tries to upskill, upgrade SHG members, short training through micro enterprises, helping them in setting up of micro enterprises, running them, sustaining them, backing them up for 3 to 5 years, and then helping them to create sustainable livelihood through starting of micro enterprises. The livelihood, in fact, is very, very important, but these livelihoods, their purpose is to comprehensive off-farm livelihood development. They require a longer training period. They will require credit risk monitoring. They they also form dairy clusters. They help in formulation of dairy clusters. In fact, you would see a lot of mushroom farming these days in villages. Mushroom farmings are now very much encouraged in villages. If you walk through villages these days, you will see every other household will have some amount of mushroom farming. Now, of course, it will require its own temperature and control, but it's much easier. In fact, Maharashtra and Bihar, when we went there were a lot of mushroom farmings. These in terms of food processing units, in the comparatively semi-urban areas of Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh, we found SHGs majorly involved in tailoring, food processing, and handicrafts. But in Bihar, when we went, we found more of farm-related activities. Sorry, did I? Yeah. So like I said, that the stage 1, higher mobilization, you see Bihar has very high household mobilization of SHGs, right? But has fewer enterprises. Comparatively, you look at Maharashtra has fewer household mobilization, but higher number of enterprises. So there's this huge difference between the two. Mobilization means coverage of households through SHGs, but the kind of entrepreneurial activity development is something that, because entrepreneurial activity development will create livelihoods not only for that particular SHG, but for others also. So that is something that stage 2 and 3 develop more through NRLM. And when we tried, based on our survey, when we tried to segregate the kind of livelihood activities, the states, Tamil Nadu had more of food processing, tailoring, micro units. Andhra Pradesh had dairy, poultry, retail, food processing units. Karnataka again had tailoring, beauty and agri-processing. Maharashtra had a lot of goat rearing. Embroidery, handicraft is also there in Maharashtra. Dairy is a major thing in Maharashtra at village level. In fact, everywhere, another programs that the government is promoting for SHG is also backyard farming, backyard poultry. So all of this is being promoted by the government. Odisha has a lot of mushroom, poultry, again, agri-related processing units, micro enterprises. How is it going from participation to power, decision-making outcomes? Because one of the important variables of women empowerment, when we create the theoretical framework for women empowerment, one of the important variables is decision-making. Now, decision-makings can be of various types. One can be household decision-making, other can be financial decision-making, non-financial decision-making. All of these are of utmost importance in terms of empowerment. In fact, a lot of these variables you will find in the NFHS data. The National Family Health Survey data, which is now till NFHS 6, you will see these variables. With these variables, if someone wants to work on the empowerment model, you will see Professor Naila Kabir is the authority in framework for women empowerment model. And when you look at her work, you will figure out how these variables create a very important pillar for the outcome, which is the women empowerment. So women empowerment in itself is not one variable. It's a composite of various parts, variables. So we see key gains in participation, very high involvement in financial decision, which was not earlier for women, not at all. Now, this data that I have exactly put in percentage is from my field experience, but similar findings you will find when you go to the SHG studies, day NRLM studies. So it has gone so high. Financial decision making, even within non-financial matters, like say children's education, you would see when we looked at the SHGs buying stuff or taking loan, the members of SHGs taking loan, we saw women taking loan for their children's education, for buying laptops for their children, for putting them into better schools. Now, there's this controversy which we shall not get into because it's not part of our coverage for this session. Putting them into private schools, which is much expensive than the public school because of this perception of private schools being better, which is another matter of debate. Enhance economic confidence to negotiate decisions at home. State level empowerment. Household boys, not only household boys, you will see they have started having voices in panchayat level. You will see women coming out and talking, and in fact some of the women have from the SHGs, as part of SHGs, have gone and to the local politicians, they have gone and they have voiced their concern, and based on those concerns they have been successful in bringing small hospitals, bringing in small schools, branches of banks being mobilized in remotest of rural areas. It's their voicing such concerns, which they, it's not me who's saying that, it's they who are coming up and saying that we are gaining confidence because of the SHGs. Of course, there will be limitations and constraints. It still has to go a long, long, long way. Financial authority is much, much less. Much less. Even if I borrow as a woman, what that money would go into, I can only have a say. I cannot take the final decision. Dominance of spouse in the household is something that is not only part of this study. You can look at from the NFHS data as well. Work on the NFHS data where there's household decision making and the spouse, head of the household, you will get your answer. Even for non-financial decision making, very low independent non-financial decision making, where the kids would study, whom the kids would marry, would the what kind of schools they would go for, what kind of clothes they would wear. All of this also shows very low independent non-financial decision making for women. And now this is not only going to change because of the financial power, because this also has a lot of social constraint, socio-cultural constraints also come into play. When we looked at the one of the major outcomes of our study was also that there was very few people who actually, very few women who actually knew each and every policy, each and every way they could get loan or they could mobilize their savings properly. They only knew part of it. So awareness and literacy forms again very important part of this outcome. Now, we have been saying that Bihar has been a state where there is more saving oriented, low enterprise. Enterprises need more savings, where savings will have more part into investment. Because as economists, we all know S and Y are complying with each other. Savings is equals to investments. If you do not have savings, and if majority of the percentage of your savings is going in consumption, how will you set up your enterprise? The livelihood generation through that source would be very restricted. And of course, the socio-cultural restricted norms that we have. Unless that is going to change, the root level is not changing. These are some of the pictures from Bihar, Maharashtra. These two, majorly Bihar and Maharashtra, I have put in. You see these women on the right-hand side who are painting. This is part of an indigenous art that we call Gond art. In fact, Gond art is something that is also very popular in Madhya Pradesh, in the tribes of Madhya Pradesh. Similarly, we have a very huge indigenous tribe in Maharashtra that does this painting. So these are indigenous paintings. They are being skilled at it, trained, and then getting their livelihood through that. You see the kind of houses that these women have? They're sitting there, the kind of savings they would generate from the kind of livelihoods that they have, livelihood sources. So, and the rural mart. You see in Gondia, it's the rural mart. Mahila Bachat Ghat is the women's self-help group. Now they put all their stuff together and put it over here, and it is sold from here. You can go and buy stuff. Anyone can go and buy stuff. They would be very beautiful paintings, very beautiful handcraft, many things that you can use for decoration, household stuff, and so on. We have very evolved platform of SHGs. We have gone a huge way, a long, long way, but still a long journey has to be taken. We have started saving more, but we need to shift our focus from saving to generation of livelihood. Women empowerment has definitely increased. In fact, when you look at the labor force participation, rural women have higher participation than urban women. And also, you would see when you look at sector-wise segregation, you know that the self-employment for women has increased much than the other employment rates, right? So it is a very important tool for both economic and social institutions. It is strengthening livelihoods while gradually enhancing women agency and empowering women. Thank you so much. Anyone? Yeah.
So, dear participants, we are now open for question and answer session. So, kindly raise your hand. Yes, we are having Manas Agarwal. Kindly, share your question.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ma'am. I'm Manas Agarwal. I wanted to ask a question that in the list of states, Ladakh was at the bottom. And so considering the ongoing protests in Ladakh and the demands for sixth schedule, if by any chance Ladakh gets sixth schedule status, will it impact SHGs in a positive way or will it remain as a neutral development for them? Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Maris, for this question. Although this is a very political question, but we always have very important economic and social impact of political decisions which are made. So it would definitely somehow impact because the kind of reach that we have seen. See, there is no segregation between the outreach activities for union territories or states. But the kind of outreach that is already being there, which is already there impacting the states and union territories, we see there's a difference between the outreach in state and union territory. So there would definitely have some kind of impact on that. But there's still a long way to see. We would have to see what kind of impact it would have. Would it go ahead in the same way that all the other union territories have gone ahead, or it would change its way and have a better example than the others?
So, ma'am, if we take into account these political developments, how can we influence and change the local situation? Because in many gram panchayats and local bodies, there is a concept of Pradhan Pati, and even if women participation are rising, their major work is carried on by the male household, by the male head of the household. So, how can we change those kind of situations at the local level, and how can we educate people for that, for the same?
Sure. So this is a concern. In fact, in my challenges, I had put that up, that autonomy is still important. And that's a socio-cultural norm. You cannot change it through forcing it into the society. It has to start from the ground level. Also, in order to check such norms, there are certain small provisions made by SHGs at the structural level. So every year, the leadership of the SHG changes, and that is through election within the members. So, in fact, you would see when we went, some of the SHGs in the remote part were like, okay, if person X has been the leader of this SHG, person X, because person X knows a lot about finance, would remain the leader throughout for like 10, 15, or 20 years. But that defeats the purpose of financial literacy and inclusion and empowerment. And that is a very small step, a very small measure that we can take in order to have inclusivity and equal distribution of power. Through such important steps, small steps, but regular monitoring of steps, we probably would have to create awareness for this.
Also, ma'am, if we talk about international law, then self-help groups may be linked to CEDAW or Beijing Platform for Action for Women Empowerment and other human rights enshrined in UDHR or ICCP or ICSCR. But are there any specific provisions for self-help groups, especially in the international law, where the entire committee of nations can come together and help in advancing the same?
So every country has a different rule. Say the self-help groups are very powerful even in Bangladesh, Afghanistan, Sri Lanka, and so on. But every country has its own norm for having such coalitions or having such kind of, how should I put it, mobilization of such organizations and institutions. So it depends on the country. Within the human rights international laws, of course, there would be standard laws for all of them that would operate even for SHGs, but specifically, it would definitely differ from country to country. And there are groups, of course, at district level, at country level, there are federations of clusters of such SHGs that work for them.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Now we can invite Anju Arya. If you are having question, kindly.
Thank you, sir. Hello, Niharika, ma'am.
Hello, Anuj.
It feels nice to have this conversation after such a long. I just had one question regarding I was in my current firm that I work for. We work for a lot of private credit organizations who look at individuals as well as organizations who have like a need for credit, and then also help them acquire insurance at an organization level or a individual level. Now I understand that in SHGs that we have currently, individuals may have enrolled in personal insurance schemes like Pradhan Mantri Jan Jeevan Jyoti Bima Yojana or the Pradhan Mantri Suraksha Bima Yojana.
Suraksha Bima Yojana.
Yeah. Yes. So I just wanted to see, just like how banks are insured against defaults as an organization, not just their individual members. Are there any organizations or institutions in place that provide insurance to SHGs against defaulters? Because a lot of SHG functions, as you explained, are based on mutual trust and then very informal ways of lending.
So, insurance, you're saying? No, no. I have not come across any insurance companies that, but they have their own mechanism. So, say if there are 10 members, there are definite cases that across the years, some members have not continuously contributed towards the internal savings fund, and thereby they have been forcefully or voluntarily dropped out of the organization. So that remains. The payment part is based on the collective credibility of SHGs and how these SHGs collectively operate and how have they been performing across the years consistently. So that's how the performance of them are monitored and they are tracked. But otherwise, I've not heard of any insurance per se that comes. That general insurance given by the government for people, which are applicable for everyone, that works even for them.
All right.
Now let us take next question from Jyoti. Please go ahead.
Hi, Dr. Niharika. Nice session it was.
Thank
Hello.
you. Hello. Thank you.
You explained your study very well and you showed different kind of data, right? So here is my question is that what research gaps do you think that exist in understanding SG self-help groups impact on women's empowerment, like that young researchers should focus on? According to you, what kind of research gap exists like?
Right, sure. So, see, the SHGs are, a lot of data is available on the government website. The only thing that we as researchers need to take care of, that there might be a very different ground reality of these SHGs while they are operating. So for SHGs, whatever is the data that you're looking at from the government side, say DANRLM or PIB.gov or so on, you also would have to definitely take a primary survey for SHGs.
No, that's okay. But I'm asking what kind of research gap do you find or do you think that
Oh,
it
yes.
exists? Mhm.
So the research gaps that I am working on is
Mhm.
one, I am trying to, there are two papers that I'm actually presently working at.
Okay.
One is already published, is based on how SHGs, there are employment challenges, how they have overcome in Bihar,
Okay.
because we have done that, whether they have actually overcome in Bihar or not. And because there are different models operated by for SHGs by state government and by institutional agencies like NABARD, I tried to look at these SHGs who were formed both by state government and NABARD. So there were two groups, and
Okay.
how these groups were performing based on their kind of, or the kind of livelihood generation activities that they undertook. Was there any kind of an impact because of the kind of backing that they had either from NABARD or from the government, state government?
From you are saying that from institutional support,
From
right?
institutional support, absolutely.
Mhm. And
So,
from
sure,
Mhm.
please go ahead, tell me.
And from any social or economic kind of research gaps exist?
Yes. So the next that I am looking at is, what is the kind of sustainability that they are. You can see a lot of states working for a lot of sustainable, environmentally sustainable livelihoods, like
Mhm.
you will see nutri gardens being created, backyard poultry being created. But how are they important, and how sustainable they are? So I'm trying to map their sustainability across the years for these SHGs, that these states are very high performing in secondary
Mhm.
data for sustainable livelihood generation, but whether they are actually sustainable across the years in these states or not in ground reality.
I got it, but I'm just looking for the research gap that's especially in the empowerment of women, right?
So empowerment of women has different variables, ma'am.
Yes.
So when you talk of empowerment, whether you're talking of household decision making, whether you're talking of financial decision making, where you're talking of non-financial decision making, political voices, political decision making.
Yes.
So these are the kind of data that you would require and check whether they are actually leading to women empowerment or not, or whether there is a lag of such variables in SHGs. And that is something that can be definitely looked upon at.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much. Let me, put my question first. So there are many questions coming up. So all participants, I will give you opportunity after this. So I am also the student of, microfinance. I did some work with marginal populations like beggars and slums. So as we have discussed about two models, one is saving model and one is livelihood model. So as per technology is concerned, we are evolving very rapidly, and we are talking about digitalization and all. With respect to these women who are working under different self-help groups, do you think what are your views that there should be extension beyond livelihood support? Because when we are talking empowerment or economic empowerment, so but we are lacking if we try to understand human development. So what is the overall performance of these SHGs? What extension should be there as per the two models we have discussed? And I want to add one more point. If we try to understand this life cycle hypothesis story, so that talks about three stages like transitional motto, then precautionary motto, and speculative motto. A population which I have discussed, slum dwellers or beggars, or we can say in general ultra poor. So during my research, as of now, I do not know what exact figures are at the ground. So I found they are just at the post stage. They are transitional, just making their livelihood to fulfill their day routine activities. But they are yet to shift to second stage, precautionary and speculative. I want your input. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. A lot of questions to look into. I'll start with the first question that you had asked, given the changes in technologies. So, we already know that there's a huge gender digital divide, and this needs no proof. We all know that. These SHGs, sir, they are the ones who have just come into the market having some kind of financial inclusion. And when we talk of financial inclusion, we are talking of very basic, like opening their bank account, signing there. In fact, when you closely look, get into the details of these bank accounts, there are many women members of such SHGs who are not even operating their own bank accounts. So their male counterpart, their husbands, spouses are operating their male accounts, or their sons are operating their male account. So when we actually talk of financial empowerment, this actually is not the kind of financial empowerment that we would want. So digital divide is a long way to go. Digital empowerment and effect of technology is a long way to go. The basics are to be met first in the remotest of areas, where the rural banks, even the rural banks, have very few outreach. Their branches are very, very scattered. So it's very tough for us to reduce the gap between this divide, because of the changes or the problems that we face in the basic autonomy or decision making power of women at the rural level. So when the socio-cultural norms are so strong and so stringent, especially at the village level, rural areas, that it's very important to first bring them all on the same platform and then talk of impact of technology, because they have no clue of technology. And most of these SHGs, despite having a lot of bank account and having loans and operating as micro enterprises, they have no clue how to use supply chain, how to use bring their products into the market, how to sell it, how to have interaction on digital platforms and so on. So in fact, sir, recently the governments have recently, I mean, like from 21 till 23, 24, Government of India and Ministry of Rural Development has signed pact with digital platforms like Amazon, Flipkart, Meesho, and so on to integrate the products of these SHGs on their platforms for selling it and giving them a lot of visibility. So that is there.
Okay, thank you very much. So now let us give opportunity to Krishna.
Hello, good afternoon, ma'am.
Hello, Krisha.
I guess from what I remember, when we were looking at NABARD SHGs at large, there were no checks and balances when it came to ground level banks, and that's why some of the women had to pay somewhere around 24.75% of interest rates.
Not only 24, it went on to 28%.
Yeah. How is that different when it comes to state government SHGs? And even with regards to NABARD SHGs in the last about 3 years, are there any checks and balances that are included at large?
All right, thank you. So, so I'll tell you, Professor Malik, Krisha was part of the NABARD SHG study that we had conducted in 2022, 23. So, Krisha, what the question that you asked about the ground level changes and realities that have whether they have changed or not. When we had gone to NABARD and presented our study, this rate of change, this rate of interest that was being charged at the ground level, which was a big shock for the officials because beyond 25%, they were not allowed to charge to SHGs. And at ground level, they were charging as high as 28%. So this is something that they claim has not been operating, or they have resolved this. But we'll have to go in the field again to find out whether such discrepancies still are operating or not. And that is why field work in such places, in such topics are of utmost importance, because in secondary data you will not find anything of this sort unless you go and work on the field. So that is very, very important. In terms of checks and balances, a lot of awareness has now or is being tried to be created by the state levels, SRLM, State Rural Livelihood Mission. In fact, you will see states where SHGs are actually very successful. It's because of the state intervention, state government intervention, SRLMs, which are very successful. It's not at the apex body that is very successful that these SHGs are successful, but the state rural livelihood missions are because they are local to those places. They have huge coverage and outreach, and they can any change that comes even within the framework of SHGs or say from the top, from the state government that it's coming, it can be trickled down in a comparatively lesser time period than if it comes from the center. So that's the kind of difference that you see in the success of SHGs between the central model and the state model.
So, any participant, do you have any more questions? I think there is one in chat box. Till then, I will read that. So, Manas Agarwal is wait. I am just reading one question from the
What
chat.
are the reasons behind success of SHGs in Bihar?
Yes, yes.
So there are n number of reasons, but one of the most important reasons of success of SHGs in Bihar is, see, it's a very simple mathematics. When you look at the percentage change, and if the base is 0, any change is looked at, or any change seems very high, right? We know that kind of change in mathematics. Another, you look at the composition of the SHGs and the model of SHGs. It's more savings oriented. So to tell you something from the field, when I try to compare the per week savings of SHG members, per SHG member, per week savings between Bihar, Maharashtra, and Tamil Nadu, there was a huge difference. As big as Bihar had the members of SHGs in Bihar, on an average, could save from districts as poor as Katihar and Bhagalpur, could save as small as 40 rupees to 50 rupees. When you come to Maharashtra, this went on to 400 to 500. And similar changes you would find in Tamil Nadu. You see the difference in the two? So it's the coverage, and mind you, the model in Bihar, which is the Jivika, is pretty strong and backed by the state government. Yeah.
We are having one more and Jia Soni. Please
Yes,
go ahead. You can.
yes. Firstly, ma'am, a wonderful session. Really, really amazing insights. And my question is about specifically about Maharashtra. So, in the last few years, we have seen a lot of financial assistance schemes coming up, like Ladki Behan Yojana, Ladki Bhau Yojana. So, do these schemes significantly impact what in the number of SHGs that are coming up, or if they are going down? That is my question. Thank you.
Sorry, ma'am, can you please repeat that? Would that affect these?
Are these financial assistance schemes directly affecting SHG's growth, or are they causing it to maybe decline in few areas or something like that? Does this change happen? That is my question.
How these schemes have impacted the change in SHGs is something that I have not covered, definitely. But see, the number of SHGs had definitely increased across the years. It has not gone down despite these schemes coming in. So, although we need to do a very in-depth study to understand the impact of such schemes, because they are direct cash transfer schemes, right? So such kind of money, because these SHGs, the major motive of such SHGs was uh, to have easy access to money or easy access to loan. We need to look into the intricacies how these kind of money inflows, cash inflows, are impacting the availability of money to such members of SHGs, and because their motive was one of those. But the number of SHGs has definitely increased. They have not lowered. So uh, I would assume that they are positively impacting. I still have to study that. That area I have not touched upon, madam.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
We can take these two questions. After that, we will be winding up.
Sure.
So let us go with SKMD Asad. Please
Yeah,
share your question.
yeah. Am I audible?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, ma'am, for the insightful session. Really loved it. Like, ma'am, you were showing that how some Indian states have effectively SHGs have worked well there, but there are also variations to it, right? So, based on your research, what socio-cultural or institutional factors explain these variations? Like, all states don't have effective SHGs till now. What do you think about that? What are the factors to it?
One, when, like I said in the last, someone asked about this, and I said, I think Risha asked that question. Uh, Success of SHGs, when you look at in various governments, various states, you see it depends a lot on the state government in particular. So if the state government is quite enthusiastic and has a lot of, because lot of new funds and new schemes are specifically given for SHGs, specifically the ones especially which are very successful, like Kerala and Bihar. So you see, everyone knows about, every other household has some or the other member involved in either Kudumbushri or Jivika. So state government's strong hold and strong involvement and coming up with schemes which is separate than the central scheme, state government specific scheme other than the central scheme, is something that is also a very important factor in getting to the success of SHGs.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Manas, kindly go ahead with your question.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. I had a question, ma'am, that if we consider India particularly, then the three most elite industries are politics, Bollywood, and cricket. And they have been quite, Bollywood especially has been quite vocal on ground level reforms when they made films like Panchayat or Toilet Ek Prem Katha. So, what do you think can we do further with politics or Bollywood or even cricket or any other sport like boxing? These superstars, how can they contribute in promoting SHG culture and particularly women empowerment when there is a lot of male dominance still present prevalent in local societies?
I think this question is quite irrelevant. Madam has done in-depth analysis on SAG model which is
Manas,
being
I'm not
available.
no authority in that. I'm sorry.
So because we are focused, she is prepared what as per her specialization is. We cannot give general commenters because we are researchers, we are following the scientific process. So scientific process involves the commenters or argumenters that should be actually corrected as per the uh, as per the process. We are having objective, we have ample literature, and we are focused on that research. After that, we are sharing our insight. Second is to political debates, political discussion, where there is no liability. We can make any comment. So therefore, we should not take this question forward. But we appreciate your question. We do not want to discourage you, but this is not the right platform to ask such question. So as we are going to conclude formally, it gives me great pleasure to extend our heartfelt thanks to our esteemed resource person, Dr. Niharika, for shedding light on the theme beyond financial inclusion, self-help groups engine of social and economic empowerment for women. Your insights are, highlighted how self-help groups are not just financial instruments, but they are served as powerful platforms for confidence building, leadership, and social transformation. The thoughtful perspectives and real life illustrations you shared have truly deepened our understanding of women empowerment at grassroots levels. So, once again, on behalf of Jindal Center for Global South, OP Jindal Global University, Jammu and Kashmir Economic Association, uh, and organizing team and all participants, I express our sincere gratitude for your time, your expertise, and your inspiration. Your contribution has made this lesson both enriching and memorable. Thank you very much, ma'am. Now
Thank you so
I would, in, I would like to, request all participants if they are able to on their camera for group photo. Dear participants, if you are in a decent position to on your camera, please on your camera for group photo.